Welcome in our good friend Bob Vanderplot, sitting there in Todd Erzin's seat. Brother, how are you?
I'm feeling powerful, or maybe just insightful being in Todd's seat. I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and except for the video that we're about to show you.
Yeah.
Okay. This video went viral over the weekend pertaining to the topic of surrogacy. Watch this.
Quick recap, we're having 2 babies. We bought 40 frozen eggs from our egg donor. 28 of those eggs survived the thawing process and then were fertilized. 12 of those fertilized eggs did not develop into usable embryos. So that makes 16 embryos that were sent to PGT testing. And we just got in those PGT testing results. Starting with Joshua's side, his one embryo that was rated good to average came back as chaotic, which checks out. That one is no longer usable. This one, which was originally graded good, came back aneuploid. Chromosome 13 only had 1 in the pair. On my side, the one that was originally graded as bad indeed came back aneuploid. Its chromosome 13 also only had 1 in the pair. This one, which was originally graded as good, came back with no DNA detected, so that's no longer usable. This one, too, which was also originally graded as good, came back aneuploid. Chromosome number 4 only had 1 in the pair. Lastly, this one, which was originally graded good to average, came back as high mosaic. Chromosome number 2 had 3 when it was supposed to have 2. All in all, we're so happy that we decided to purchase as many frozen eggs as we could, 40, because that leaves us with these 10 embryos for 2 babies. And we're told that the majority of journeys take 2 to 3 transfers to get pregnant. We've decided which embryo on both sides that we want to transfer to our 2 surrogates. We'll keep you updated as we do the transfers and as we find out whether or not we're pregnant, and continue to be transparent of how many transfers it takes. But we're not going to share the sex of both babies until we're officially pregnant, just like any other expecting parents would. Thanks for following along, and we're excited to keep you updated.
So that's a homosexual man talking in depth, in detail, about essentially trying to manufacture a human life on an open market with him and his gay lover. And this video went everywhere. It was viral everywhere on social media over the weekend. I just want your instant reaction, Bob, without any of my additional commentary first.
Well, when you initially sent it to me, so take a look at this, and I want to discuss on the show, my 2 words back to you are still the 2 words I have: pure evil. And I think it's ironic, Steve, that you do a lead into your show with an advertisement for preborn baby and how we save a baby's life with ultrasounds and everything else with technology, and talking to the
with a mom who's not anywhere in this video, by the way. Yeah.
With a mom, and then how we've reduced human life to frozen embryos and on a sticky note, and this sticky note is you're discarded or you live. And then you have, so when I take a look at this, I think, first of all, it is so far away from God's created order. 2 guys trying to say, as we become pregnant, everybody knows you can't become pregnant. That's why you got surrogates in the process. You purchase 40 of these embryos, and now you get to go through your own calculation to try to find out what is the perfect child for you to raise, when you are denying them the access to a real mom and a mom's input in raising a child. But you're going to discard then 39 other lives. This to me is why God would say, you know, guys, I'm probably just going to turn my back on you guys. There's judgment coming if we're going to do this. You're playing God. So the other thing that hit me, Steve, is the scriptures, John 10:10. The thief comes to rob, kill, steal, and destroy. To me, that's what I saw. I've come to rob marriage. I've come to kill babies, destroy even the basic identity of human life, where Jesus says, I've come to give life and to give it abundantly now. So to me, there's such a contrast. Quite frankly, I feel sorry for this guy and for his gay lover, because obviously they are trapped.
There's a writer out there named Katie Faust. Have you heard of her?
I have heard of Katie.
In fact, she'd be a good get for you for next year's leadership summit.
You know, Katie and I spoke at the same thing in Pennsylvania. It would have been last October. And I talked to her about our leadership summit. She wanted to come to this year's summit. You're right. She would be a great get.
The premise of a lot of her writing, and in many respects, she is quantifying, you know, when our state became ground zero for the marriage debate, and we pointed out all of these various slippery slope arguments, things like, well, what happens, can 2 guys, if their father and son, okay, and, you know, the father's in his 50s and the son is in his 20s or 30s, why can't they get married then? Because they can't conceive a child, right? So so the typical concerns of genetics with inbreeding at that level are not on the table. So these are all the various things we pointed out during those debates that were clear openings and fallacies to point out the entire fallacy of what they were arguing on behalf of. And her argument really is that Obergefell is the genesis of all of this. These kinds of videos we see, Dylan Mulvaney's, everything else, that Obergefell is the genesis of it. And Katie points out the central core of her premise, the best that I can understand it, is that since Obergefell, the paradigm of child rearing and procreation has completely flipped, okay? And in the past, what happened for thousands of years, essentially, of human existence, is that children and their priorities were put ahead of the adults. And now what we have is that the children are an asset to be acquired. Children serve at the leisure of the adults, or even are allowed to live at the leisure of the adults. And I would argue that Katie's premise could even be extended to COVID, where we told the young generation, instead of just secluding the elderly and the infirmed and the vulnerable, your way of life has to go on hold indefinitely, may never come back. No, you'll never have a graduation. You'll never have a prom.
No state tournament, no national tournament.
All the rites of passage that every previous generation got to take for granted, even when we were in wartime, we still did these things. You don't get to do these things. We may never get to do them again because we couldn't possibly just take the elderly and infirmed and isolate them, since they're the people that are the most vulnerable. Instead, the young and the healthy have to suffer. This entire paradigm has flipped, is her argument. And she says that a lot of this goes back to Obergefell, because it uprooted what is the true and ultimate meaning of marriage, and why the state has an interest in the institution and preserving it in the first place.
Without question. And she couldn't be more right. Matter of fact, I think her book, the title of her book, to give her a shout out, is Them Before Us,
correct,
meaning the kids before us. And we have completely, you watch this video, it is us, whoever these two guys are, I forget their names, but these two guys, it is us before them. And so what they've done is, with these sticky notes, is basically going to a new car dealership. Well, what model do you want? You know, do you want 4 doors? Do you want 2 doors? You want stick shift? You want automatic? You want a tilt wheel? You want a panoramic sunroof? What do you want? But let's keep discarding this until we get the one that we want. Why? Because that child is there to serve us. These two surrogate moms
to
are
complete
there
us, to fulfill us,
to completely usurp this deal. And that's why I believe, Steve, the more crazy this goes, and I believe this is crazy. I think a generation ago, people watch this, they go, that is flat out crazy. That would never happen.
We probably can't say on the air what people a generation ago would have said to things like that.
Exactly. But now today it's the norm. Matter of fact, I was disembarking a plane back in Chicago, and I see 2 guys with 2 kids. It only reminds me of this video. And I was just like, I'm not going to say anything, but it's just wrong. Just wrong what you guys are doing to these 2 children, because it's completely you two and your feelings and your love saturation for one another, for whatever it is that you have. And now you're going to inflict it on these 2 kids. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I think Katie's exactly right. I really do believe, I've said this frequently, especially back in Naples, Florida, last winter, I said, this is the first time in a long time where I believe we could see the restoration of biblical marriage, one man and one woman, and hopefully for a lifetime with Christ at the center. And the reason is because what Katie has pointed out, what you're pointing out, what we've tried to point out for a long time, you take the parameters of marriage off, God's design for marriage, and let the human mind just wonder. You'll be amazed at what they will conceive, no pun intended, what they will conceive to be the next generation of marriage. And we're seeing it right now. Why we can't know what restroom to use, what sport we should be involved in. And now look at this, about you reduce life to sticky notes. And I believe the reason this video went viral, Steve, I believe there's still a lot of good common sense, God-fearing Americans out there going, this is absolutely nuts of what we're doing.
So there's a reason why this stuff has attached itself to the homosexual movement in America. And I think one of the arguments that we're going to have at the time of Lawrence v. Texas in 2003, we cannot, that was the gateway drug to this, when sodomy law, there were only a few states left that even had sodomy laws. and that was used to strike them down. We can't verify that anybody was actually in prison anywhere for violating sodomy laws.
Right.
At the time of Windsor and Obergefell, there were already homosexuals going to things like Unitarian and Episcopal churches for quote-unquote marriages, right? Okay. They just weren't recognized by the state as law in most places in America. But no one was, if you went to a Unitarian church or an Episcopal church in Alabama or any of these Bible Belt states and got quote unquote married there as a homosexual, there was nobody sitting in prison for acting on their heterodoxy. Okay. So it wasn't like there was some threat against some warped view of civil rights as to why we had to redefine all of this. The reason we had to redefine all of this is so we could do exactly what is being done right now. That's why it all had to be redefined. And that's the truth. This was all, the intent was to get us to the place that we are right now because of the spirit of the age that is behind all of this. And what we're going to have to figure out on the right, Bob, is we're going to have to figure out one of two things. Either because homosexuality has absolutely become mainstreamed in the American right as well. So those who believe in that on our side are going to have to figure out, and the burden of proof is on them, frankly, because people like you and me are right about everything. So they're going to have to figure out then how we can draw, like groups like Gays Against Groomers and people like this are going to have to figure out what is the appropriate line to draw between consenting adults and then when we start involving children and redefining the norms of society. And they're going to have to be on the front lines of figuring that out because the burden of proof is on them. Because, see, I don't think we can do that. And evidence of what's become of our society since Obergefell and Windsor just verifies that until right now, I'm correct. Maybe there's another way to do this we haven't thought of. By all means, I'm open to it, but you're going to have to submit it. Because I'll also tell you this: if we go back, if we eject homosexuality from the American right again, let me tell you, you're going to have to hire a whole bunch of new congressional staffers in Washington, D.C. I think, folks, you'll be shocked how much of the Washington, D.C. Republican Party is gay.
And not just D.C. Republican, okay. Your own state Republican Party.
But in D.C., it's acute. All right. So, but we're going to have this conversation on our own side. Either there's a way to say, as long as you leave the kids alone and you don't try to reorder any of society, then it will be any of our business. I'm very skeptical. Because of the point of permitting these relationships is to reorder society.
Oh, it is.
But if you can figure out a means to do it, I'm listening. But the burden of proof is on you, because the origin of all of this stuff is Obergefell and Windsor. We were not having these conversations prior to this.
There's no doubt. As a matter of fact, if you were in our team meeting, Steve, and this would be frequent team meetings, we would talk about what is the root cause. And the root cause we go back to is marriage and family. And you go back further to the root causes, you're going against God's word, his design, and his truth. So our God's a God of order. He's not a God of chaos. And the more further you get away from his design, the more chaotic you're going to get, the more divisive you're going to get, and the more warped you're going to get. And so we've walked so far away from his design and from his order that you're getting stuff like this. Mm-hmm. We need to have leaders willing to speak out today. What is God's design? What is God's order? Why is marriage and family good for society, good for a community, good for a culture, versus doing the garbage that we're doing here? And so we've talked about this on the life issue. You talk about it on the marriage issue, the raising of children issue. You've got a lot of voices out there right now clamoring to say, we need to rise to a higher standard. And that higher standard is God's order. Remember, a lot of times these presidential candidates will come into Iowa and they ask us about if, they're giving us their vision for America. They want our endorsement. They want our support. And sometimes, Steve, I'll ask them, what is the purpose of government? Because the purpose of government is not lower taxation. The purpose of government is not it is the pursuit of righteousness and justice. God wants order in a culture, and according to his word, not according to whatever you want to feel. What you just watched on that video is whatever we want to feel. So whatever Steve and I want to feel, that's how we should rewrite the culture. We shouldn't do it. This is even going with John F. Kennedy about don't ask your country what you can do for you, but ask, what can you do for your country?